Welcome. Appreciate you guys coming to our panel, and we have a giveaway. Everybody get a ticket when they came in to win a trip to the museum, all expenses paid. As long as you get your tickets. And that's how we suckered you into coming in and just making sure you stay for the whole time. As soon as I see a couple people leave, then I'll call the tickets. It could happen at any time, so who knows. My name is John Hardie. I'm one of the founders of the museum. Also one of the founders of Classic Gaming Expo. My partner's here. Yep. Yeah.
I am Joe Santulli, also co-founder of National Videogame Museum and founder of Digital Press.
I'm Sean Kelly. I'm same credentials as most of them, although I didn't found Digital Press. I did found the museum and Classic Gaming Expo, and the three of us are directors of the museum. So we're the guys that run the museum in Texas.
So we don't really know what the hell we're going to talk about today, but we figured we'd answer questions, tell some stories. Did anybody come to my panel last year? These guys weren't here. All right, so we can tell some of the same stories. There's really a few of you that heard them before. Good, it gives a little more material now we can discuss. I'm going to let these guys do a lot of the talking because I spoke last year, but we'll all chime in. That's just the way we work. But, real quick, we opened the museum in April of 2016 after I don't know how long it took, about 2 years, right, getting it going?
2 years of building.
Building it. We were very fortunate. It was kind of I like to say like a lightning strikes type thing, the right place at the right time. And for those of you that know, we formed the museum, what was called the Videogame History Museum in 2009. And we basically had been doing our own show. If anyone ever had come to Classic Gaming Expo in Las Vegas, we ran that from 1999 up to 2012. There was one in 2014. We had kind of advisors on that. And our museum exhibit grew and grew at that show, 7,000 square feet, but again, not in a professional setting. We'd have a room this size, say, and we would just fill it up with tables and as much stuff as we could jam on those tables at the time. And it was all out for people to see up front and personal. In 2004, we went to the people at E3 and said, hey, how would you like us to do an exhibit? And they said, yeah, we'd love that. And we went, the first year they had Kentia Hall was downstairs, and we started doing E3, and we've been doing it ever since. And that expanded into Game Developer Conference and all these other shows. It was up to about 5 shows a year. We were doing PAX and South by Southwest and Kamikaze and all these crazy things. It was at a show called DICE that we ran into a gentleman named Randy Pitchford. Anybody know Randy? Modern day, Gearbox Software, Borderlands, right? So Randy's the head of Gearbox, and we met him at a show. And I always love to tell this quick story, and then we'll move on. But so in doing E3 for many years, we'd have people come up to us. This is the best exhibit. Forget Sony and Nintendo. You guys are. This is my favorite place to be. And we want you to come to Brazil and to Spain and to do this and to do that. And after hearing that for 10 plus years, you become a little jaded, and especially because it never materialized. After the show, you'd contact these people, and, oh yeah, I'll get back to you. We're in a plane, and you never hear it's crickets after that, right? You never hear another word. So we never went to Spain or Brazil or these great places. But at this show, DICE, that we went to, we met a gentleman named Randy Pitchford. Now, to be honest, I'm old school, I'm Atari era. I wouldn't know Randy Pitchford from anyone sitting, in the audience here. Just some nerdy looking guy with glasses, right? And he came up and he said, oh, we're building my office, and we're moving to Frisco, Texas. And he showed me pictures of his office. There was like a little mini museum in there. And I'll be honest, I completely dismissed the guy. Just from being jaded, not that I was trying to be a jerk about it, but I heard the story 100 times, and oh yeah, that's nice, and whatever. And then during the show, we started to see he was being interviewed, and in our living room, our 80s living room that we had set up at DICE, and we started to see, who was the other guy? Tim Schafer was there. So we're seeing like, this guy's in those same circles, and maybe we should pay attention. And whole thing was after the show, each of us was gonna contact one of these big wigs at a company and say, hey, can you help us? We're looking for support. I picked Randy. He's too chickened out and never emailed Tim Schafer, the other guy. But I did email Randy and I said, hey, buddy, remember at the show we were talking and we're gonna do all this? And he goes, yeah, absolutely. And he, if you don't know Randy Pitchford up front, whether you're aware of his persona, you like him, dislike him, the man is a genuine individual and he stands by what he does. And he brought us down to Frisco, Texas, introduced us to the city, the mayor, all the different branches of government, and helped us along the way to pitch what we wanted to do. And although the plan changed over time, over that course of 2 years, from being in one place versus another, and amount of space and things like that, he's the reason really we ended up in Frisco, Texas, in case you're curious. We did try to go to Sunnyvale and places like that where we thought, hey, the industry was born here, but again, crickets when we, Sunnyvale, San Jose, Chamber of Commerce, nothing. So that's why we're in Frisco, Texas, and if you're ever anywhere near Dallas, we're just north of it, about 20 minutes. Highly recommend it to come by. And one person today will get to come to Frisco, Texas on our dime. So, and I will give you, I'm there day to day. I'll give you a personal tour of the museum and behind the scenes and things like that. So, looking forward to it. And let's talk some more stories, guys.
The one thing that if I were sitting down there, the question that I would be asking is, why these three guys? Why did they open a museum? What do they know? Where do they come from? Are they qualified to do this kind of a thing? So just a little bit about us. I founded Digital Press in 1992 with a friend of mine, not one of these guys, but a childhood friend of mine that we played a lot of games together before there were even video games. We were board gaming together. His name's Kevin Olenitz. Kevin and I decided one day that we had been playing these Atari games and Intellivision games at a point when NES had pretty much already come and gone. So it was 1991, and we're thinking to ourselves, are we the only people that are playing this old stuff? And we have this fascination for trying to fill up our collections. Like, we were trying to collect every Atari 2600 game. We thought we could get every ColecoVision game in the box. On top of which, the issue back then was, not only are there people out there, but where in the hell are we going to find the lists of these games? Because the internet wasn't really invented yet. So we had to start it ourselves. We figured, well, let's just go ahead and make our list of what we have, and then let's see if we can reach out there. So this organization, Digital Press, was really a newsletter. Let's get this out, we'll send it to Pro Magazine, see if somebody catches on to it, maybe they'll publish it, and we'll find these other guys who are doing the things that we're doing. Maybe we can kind of build lists and find a community. Or maybe it's just the two of us that do this and we're nuts. Well, it wasn't really very long after that I discovered that these two guys were sort of waiting in the wings thinking the same thing. So John was doing his Atari thing, collecting Atari games, hardware, big time into Atari computers. Sean had this awesome Intellivision collection, and both of these guys pretty much wrote in when one of our issues, I guess, published in Video Games and Computer Entertainment. Do you remember where you heard about the fanzine?
I really don't. I had started in '89. I had a BBS that was dedicated to people that were collecting classic, and you got to kind of air quote the word classic in 1989 because the video game industry, or the classics that I was collecting in television, Atari, things like that, they were only, so to speak, dead for, 4 or 5 years at that point. But I had several people that were calling in when we were talking about classic video games, and I don't remember if I found it in a digital press in a magazine or if one of the people that I was talking to on my BBS was how I got introduced to digital press. But yeah, that kind of snowballed it for me. As soon as digital press, then hey, there's a whole bunch of other people out there. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Once that got published and people like John and Sean started to write in, we reached out more and more and discovered that there really were quite a lot of people out there that were collecting old games. So it seemed like we had stumbled into something. And over the years, the three of us, along with a really large organization of people around the world, started to put these lists together and created the very first guide like price guide. So you think about how Beckett might do a price guide for comic books or baseball cards. We did the digital press collector's guide for video games. And it was an actual physical book, and it was compiled by a tremendous group of talented people around the world that specifically had their own majors. So John was the Atari guy who would handle all of those. Sean did in television. We found guys that were great with Commodore 64 and all sorts of things that we didn't even collect for. And as that organization grew and the internet started to come around, then we were starting to look for new avenues for, well, what do we do next? How do we grow this, or what's the next step for us? As John said, Classic Gaming Expo started in '99, and he was involved with that. He brought Sean in. I was a vendor. I was digital press selling my books at the very first Classic Gaming Expo, and then one of the organizers at that time left, and these guys asked me if I would like to join them with the expo. And here we go, right? So we start the story that John just told you. So now all of a sudden we're doing museums and traveling exhibits. But I think one of the things about having a museum like this that is kind of hard to put your finger on from coming in from the outside is just how much stuff do they have. You go into our museum, it's 10,000 square feet, which is maybe twice this room.
More than that.
3 times.
Yeah, maybe 3 times.
It's big, but it's not massive. It's not spend a whole day walking around the place and still not see everything. It's maybe 3 or 4 hours and you see everything. But what you're seeing is only what we have out on display at that time. Over all of those years of collecting and traveling museums and meeting industry people and gathering documents and archives and more games and things that we didn't know about, we have a library that's, I think, second to none, a physical library of gaming. When you talk to people that have complete NES collections or Genesis collections or Dreamcast or Saturn or Game Gear, we have that.
Most of those people are specializing on a certain system. I mean, some of them are more comprehensive, but if you look at anybody who specializes in, NES or Super NES or even Atari, we have that, and we have that, and we have that, and we have that, and we have that. We have. That's what we've been doing. We've been doing it for 30 years. We've been doing it for. We started doing it at a time when you still could do it. We were at the auction last night watching some of the prices of some of that stuff, and my gosh, I mean, they were paying $900 for stuff that I threw out at one point.
Hey, made me want to sell out on these guys.
Right?
So yeah, it's true. Like Sean said, like the guy that collected a complete NES collection, like the awesome museum that they have next door, that's great. But generally, that guy that has the complete NES collection probably doesn't also have the complete 3DO collection, right? Who cares? We do. And the museum that we have today, which is, as Sean says, 3, maybe 4 times the size of this room, is our 1.0. We have a 2.0 that's in the works. This is something that we signed up with the city of Frisco with the day that we showed up there. And that 2.0 museum would be 50,000 square feet, possibly more. We're not exactly sure where Frisco stands on that right now, but it's already in the works. And that particular museum will have all of those game software libraries, as well as much of our collection as we can get out that you would have access to on a daily basis. So whereas today, you come to the museum and you kind of play the theme that we're interested in at the time. So we'll put games out that we think fit this monthly theme, or are popular games that people always come to a museum to play. But in 2.0, you'll walk into a real library type of museum game. So, I've visualized this for people before. I wish I could show it, but it's only in my head, I think. That you would walk through this area where it's just like a real library, but all of the walls and shelves are acrylic or glass. And you would see through time all the complete Atari 2600 collection, all the Intellivision, all the NES, the Genesis, 3DO, so on and so on. And at some point, walking through all of these corridors, at the end, there would be a librarian. And that librarian would say, how can I help you? And you would hand her your driver's license, for example, and say, I want to play Toe Jam and Earl that I saw in aisle A. And she would go behind that wall that you were at and pull the game out, hand you the game, and you would sit at station 30 and plug it into a Genesis and be able to play for as long as you'd like. And that is just a tiny piece of the big thing that we want to do in the future. So we do plan on putting that collection that we spent so many years building completely in the hands of you guys to see.
Yeah, a lot of, just to jump in on that, What a lot of people don't realize is some of the collections we've got are much more beyond games. We've always collected memorabilia and swag and all kinds of stuff. I mean, some of that's pretty monumental. But there's also a huge archive that we can't really show right now, which consists of paperwork. You guys all know Cats Can't Go Whirly, founders of Electronic Games. So many years ago, they donated their entire archive to us, which consisted not only of like review copies of games, but also press releases and things like that, starting at the beginning, you know, and going up through Nintendo and Sega and whatnot. Tom Sloper, another guy who saved all those old press releases. So we have boxes and boxes and boxes of paperwork that we're in the process of archiving it, and we want to make it available to people because it would be cool to come in and be able to search, hey, I want to know everything about Toe Jam and Earl, and you know, and you'll punch that in and boom, something will come up and say, oh my God, there was a sequel planned that they announced, but you know, so all that will be there as part of this comprehensive library, but just due to limited space and, you know, resources, we don't have that right now. But that's all to come. So what we plan for 2.0 is pretty, you know, pretty amazing, pretty groundbreaking, and it'll definitely become a destination that you want to come visit and explore with us.
So one of the things that I want to talk to you guys about, and most of the people that are here are collectors, and one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is something that kind of came into view after we opened the museum. So you know, we each had our own ideas. Like I said, Joe started digital press, I had a BBS, and John was hunting down anything and everything made by Atari for no apparent reason. But we all kind of had our own ideas, and I don't think we really understood why we had those ideas. Like, we knew that video games were a big deal, and they impacted our life, and they were an important part of popular culture throughout our lifetime. But I think when we opened the museum, I kind of opened my eyes a little bit to the bigger picture. So what I want to do with our museum and our collection is I want to think of the big picture. I want to look at it in terms of what happens 100 years from now when all of us are gone. So where is all this stuff? So are people going to need to see this stuff, or is digital archiving good enough? You know, that's what my view of the museum is. So I feel like I'm putting together some sort of a time capsule of the history of the video game industry, and I'm not going to be here always to present that, but I want to bring together as much stuff that I can in Frisco, Texas. And Frisco, Texas is arbitrary. It really doesn't matter where it is, but I want to bring together as much stuff as I can in one big lump, so that 100 years from now, people are going to be able to go through all of this stuff and sort it out, and they're going to be able to figure out, oh, well, this is why this happened, and this is how you know, Nintendo invented this type of a controller, or this is why Atari did this or that. And one of the obstacles in my path of doing that, quite frankly, is all of you people. Quit buying stuff. No. What I would like for you...
The frozen gas starts to spray.
Don't pay attention to this. Really what I would like to do is I would like to give... I would like everybody to kind of think of that big picture, because I never really did until there was a museum. So everybody here, or one of the things I was kind of thinking about this at the auction last night. So people are spending all this crazy money on all this stuff, and what are they doing with this stuff? Like what? I'll give you another quick story. So back in the day, when Atari was building arcade Pong machines, there were different forms that it took. It took the regular stand-up yellow Pong. There was also a small tabletop Pong that was in the shape of a doghouse called Puppy Pong, and there was another one that was a little bit more sophisticated looking, and it was called Dr. Pong. So Puppy Pong was intended to be in, you know, like children's places. Dr. Pong was intended to be used in doctors' offices to keep kids or even adults occupied as they're waiting for their doctor's appointments. But the last one is called Barrel Pong. So Barrel Pong is super rare. I mean, don't get me wrong, but Puppy Pong and Dr. Pong are incredibly rare. I think there's, what, 3 Puppy Pongs known? 2 Puppy Pongs.
3 Dr. Pongs.
and 3 Dr. Pungs known, and I think we have 2 of the 3 Dr. Pungs, and we have 1 of the puppy Pungs. But recently, a barrel Pung became available to us, and we had never seen it before. We knew, we'd heard about it. We asked Al Alcorn, who designed Pong, and Al said there was no barrel Pong when we spoke to him, but Al's getting a little up in years. I think he forgets things sometimes. No, he doesn't remember. Anyway, so recently a barrel Pong became available, and we wanted that barrel Pong. Like, we have all of the Pongs on display in the museum, first thing you see, and we're really proud of it. It's cool. You know, most people have never heard of Puppy Pong or Dr. Pong, and it really, like, it's really cool when you're in the museum and you watch people come in and say, "Oh my God, why did they make a video game shaped like a doghouse?" And there's a little card to explain it. So we wanted that freaking barrel Pong to go in that exhibit. Nobody knows there's a barrel Pong. Thank you. So anyway, we talked with the guy that had the barrel Pong, and we went back and forth over a couple of months, how much you want for it, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, we offered the guy $10,000 for the barrel Pong, which, you know, nobody knows how much a barrel Pong is. I don't think one has ever sold before, but $10,000 is a lot of money. We didn't end up getting that barrel Pong. We don't know what the final bid is. Somebody paid a couple dollars more, but the difference between whoever won it and what we did with, or, you know, our intention for that barrel Pong is, so that barrel Pong for the last 30 years has been sitting in somebody's basement. And now it's going to be sitting in somebody else's basement for the next 30 years. You know, so what I really hope, I'm not suggesting that nobody buy anything other than us. That would be stupid. But what I am suggesting is that I think you got to look at the big picture. So if you buy that barrel Pong, what happens with that barrel Pong? What are you going to do with it? Are you going to show it to anybody? What are you going to do with your collections? And that was one of the things that kind of I don't want to say prompted the museum, but you know, we had these big collections of really cool stuff, and nobody ever got to see them. And it, you know, as impressive as it is to show your buddy, you know, look at, I got a complete Nintendo collection. If I'm the only guy that ever sees that Nintendo collection, it's really kind of boring. I don't impress myself with how much I've seen it. Yeah, it's great, but I really enjoy letting other people see it. So the day we opened the museum and people came pouring through the door, the day we opened the museum, there was a block outside, there was a line outside the place 3 city blocks long to get into the museum to see our stuff. And we got to just stand back and watch people really enjoy what we had collected over the past 30 years. And I'll tell you what, that was the best feeling in the world. That was so awesome to be able to see those people getting a kick out of it. And I kind of want to, like I said, I'm kind of hoping that I can press on people, you know, look at the big picture. So what happens to your collection, you know, 30 years from now, or what happens to it 50 years from now? Another quick story that I have, I don't know how many people know or have heard of Sid Bolton. Sid Bolton was this Canadian collector, and he ran the Personal Computer Museum in Hamilton, Ontario. He had put together an amazing collection. It's really, really impressive collection. I went up to see it about a month ago, and I spoke to his widow about it. So Sid was a fairly young man. I don't even know completely or exactly what happened, but for some reason or other, just in his 40s, Sid died, just completely out of the blue. And his wife, who knows virtually nothing about video games, is left with this giant video game collection, and she doesn't know what the heck to do with it. So I went up there and I spent a couple days and I went through the collection and trying to help this poor woman that I mean, genuinely feel sorry for her, because he left her with a lot of debt and a lot of responsibilities that she wasn't used to handling. And now all she has is this big stack of video games that she doesn't really know what to do with it. And she's been told that it's worth X number of dollars. It's really not. The problem is that Sid didn't have any sort of a plan. You know, Sid never really thought big picture. Yeah, this is great. I'm building my collection, and all of a sudden he didn't have the opportunity to complete his collection or to continue building his collection, and it was passed on to somebody that knows nothing about it. And I guess, like I said, that's kind of the message that I'm trying to get across is make a plan. What are you going to do with your stuff? Even if you're immortal, where's John Hancock? But make a plan. It's funny because my partner Joe just talked to John Hancock about that this morning.
John Hancock
John does have a plan, you know. make a plan. And it kind of goes back to my whole, what I started talking about initially, is gathering up this big pile of stuff in one place, as big a pile of stuff in one place as possible. The thing is 100 years from now, as somebody's trying to sift through the history of the video game industry and trying to figure out what happened where, if everything is scattered all over the country or all over the planet, in every little nook and cranny, that story is much harder to tell than as if they had a big pile of stuff in this location and that location, a couple of big piles of stuff. It's a lot easier to decipher what happened in the video game industry if you know, as much of it is gathered together as possible. And that's kind of what my message is. Have a plan.
Yeah, we hate to, we don't mean to be morbid at all, and nobody likes to think about that type of thing, and but it has, as Sean said, it's opened our eyes. We have arrangements for our stuff to be, fully integrated into the museum when the time comes. But yeah, I mean, we could sit up here and do a whole talk just on things that we have had experience with, even developers, and we're all getting up there. And Sean and I had a guy, if you're Atari 2600 fans, there's a gentleman who did the graphics for them for a lot of the games. He worked with Howard Warshaw on E.T. and Yar's Revenge. His name was Jerome Domerat, and he was just a graphic artist. That's all he did was the graphics. Jerome passed away kind of suddenly, and his sisters didn't want anything to do with his stuff, and they called in the state because they wanted his house, and the house in Los Gatos, big money. That's all they wanted. Jerome was a bit of a hoarder, organized hoarder, but he had just crap everywhere, and the state was going to come in and
they were going to come in with dumpsters.
Dumpsters, right?
Really?
Throw it out.
All in the garbage.
And we even spoke to the people in the county, and the guy said, "Oh, don't worry, any video game stuff we'll send to you." And then we thought about it. We're like, "What's this guy going to know? If Jerome has floppy disks that have source code or things like that, is this guy going to know that that's something important?" And we flew out on like a day's notice and went through the place. And Jerome had a huge videotape collection, right? And so here's all these videotapes, like every episode of The Simpsons is recorded, right? And then boom, right in the middle, you see Sega Virtual Hamster demo, right? So, would a guy have caught that if he had, if the city had come in? No, but again, this is what happens, and so, again, we're not saying, hey, don't buy, don't donate it to us, we don't care, but have a plan, that's the main thing, the main message we're trying to get across.
So while you're all writing out your wills, making your appointments to the doctor, I'd like to, while you're doing that, let me share some museum stories, some fun, something a little light. I was the feet on the ground when we started to build it. John was in a full-time job, Sean has his store. I don't have kids. My wife and I were pretty mobile at the time, so I elected to go to Frisco, Texas to be the first guy there as things were building, to sort of watch as it was going. It was a long and difficult process, but something I would never trade. I would never trade the world for it. I enjoyed the time I was out there. One of the things that was kind of funny about the whole process was we basically moved into a giant empty white box. I mean, if you've ever been to a Home Depot or BJ's, that's pretty much what the museum looked like when we inherited it. So we walked in and you have these 40-foot high ceilings, the place echoes like crazy.
The building that we were in used to manufacture rockets for the space shuttle at one point or another.
So they had these giant roofs, and so there was a lot of building that had to get done, but during the course of the building, we also had to figure out how we were going to fill it up and what it was going to look like, and while we had plenty of really good blueprints for how that was going to be, it's a whole different thing when you're actually there and you're seeing it build, and then you start to think, uh-oh, I'm not so sure I thought that completely out, because, for example, in 10,000 square feet, you have lots and lots of walls, white walls. Now, a lot of them will have exhibits in front of them, but a lot of them won't, and a lot of those walls go up pretty high, and there's walls everywhere. So what are we going to do? I think our original plan was, well, we have so much stuff, surely we could hang up every jacket and t-shirt and poster and piece of memorabilia to sort of splash them walls with color. And I think going into it, that was pretty much the way we were going to go. But we had sort of a lucky accident. while we were there. One room that we definitely, set of walls that we definitely needed to have painted was a classroom. We have a classroom, we had these 2 doors, and we thought it would be really cool if the 2 doors had warp pipes painted on them, and you had this cool Mario pixel art sort of thing on the outside, so kids would get a kick out of going in through the one warp pipe, going to class, and coming out the other one. So we needed to find an artist to do that. We didn't have anybody, and we were in Texas and kind of new to the scene there. But we were sharing the building with a company called Frisco Arts, who was doing art. And Frisco Arts had their own little mailing list. So we asked them, could you petition your local people, your community of artists, to help us out with this mural that we want to put in the classroom? Which they happily did. So they sent something out, and the next day we had 2 emails from some local artists. One of the guys was Ron Martin, and I walked through the entire museum with him, but he really was focusing on this one wall, and Ron was like, wow, look at all these white walls, what are you guys going to do? I said, well, you know, maybe there's some other places that we could paint, but we really need to focus on this wall. So he left, another woman came in, and then the next day, our email inbox was exploded with messages from people that wanted to paint murals in our museum. And we're like, well, what the heck happened? And as we're responding to some of these people, it turns out that one of the people on the Frisco Arts mailing list also wrote for the Dallas Morning News and had published that same note in the morning newspaper. So everyone in the Dallas area that was an artist now had access to this request. So my wife and I, being the only ones there at the time, had to do these, I don't even know how to explain, like seminars. We had walkthroughs with big groups of artists that wanted to do murals. And we kind of walked through, we knew what all of these boxes were going to be, so we sort of pitched what we wanted to do there and asked them, after you leave, write up something, give us a drawing, explain to us how you would fill this space. And between the 3 of us, we must have reviewed art for 3 weeks, right? Just different sketches, and we found 7 super talented people. I mean, we were just saying last night, we had to turn down more great artists than I ever thought I would meet. But the 7 people that we found did such an amazing job. And if you've ever seen this museum, I mean, this comes from a place of love. I mean, so just a perfect example is this one woman, Anna, she just drew almost like a sketch on a napkin of what she had planned for this one huge wall that you were going to play all different sorts of game systems, so sort of a hodgepodge idea. And she took literally a hodgepodge. She took characters from GoldenEye to Minecraft to Pac-Man and Frogger to, Madden, right? So
the fun part about Anna is she doesn't know video games. So she had to actually research what are popular video game characters and then put them in this napkin drawing. She knew nothing about it.
And we love the napkin. That was great.
Unbelievable.
Like, we have to do this. Now, we didn't know how long it was going to take. We didn't know if it was going to look as good on this giant wall. And I'm telling you, this wall, I think it's 40 feet wide, and it's at least 15 feet tall. And we needed that whole wall filled with this mural. Well, to make a long story short, it took 6 weeks, every single day, painting that. And she was just one of the 7 people, so it became a little bit of a family in there of artists. We had one of the guys, again, we were lucky enough to be in the area that we were in, but Oliver was the guy that worked for Insomniac Games that designed all the characters in Spyro the Dragon, except for Spyro the Dragon, and many of the characters in Ratchet and Clank. And he designed our mascot, Blip, and he did a whole bunch of the murals in there as well. In fact, one of the funny things about Oliver, he was the guy that ended up doing that mural with the pixel art. And pixel art was absolutely not his thing. He's a character art type guy. But one of the ideas that we had this handheld room, and his idea was, let's try one of these forced perspective drawings. And I didn't know what that was at the time, but essentially, just for if you didn't know, forced perspective basically means the picture looks a certain way when you're standing right in front of it looking at it. But he was doing this forced perspective painting inside of a room that's sort of a weird octagon shape and had a ceiling, and the ceiling was going to be incorporated in it. So what he ended up doing is he created a model of that room that he could put over his head. And he put the model of the room over his head, and he would basically just go like this, and how is this going to look if I'm standing inside the room? And that's exactly what it turned out to be. So that room today is Blip, the mascot that he designed. Basically going like this, he's playing you're the handheld, you're in the game. He's holding a Game Boy or something, and you're the screen. But when you go into that room, like all fours perspective, and you look around, you can't tell what it is. If you're standing, walking in, you can. It's pretty amazing.
Good stuff there.
And then, and one other really quick one about the art. We were, there's a bathroom. Now, there's not a lot of art you can do around a bathroom. It's restrooms, men and women. But we did think, well, we got all these great guys, very talented artists. Why don't we come up with some sort of a theme that would include both a male and female perspective? And I think for a while we were going with maybe Gauntlet. I think that's what we were on for a while. So we pitched that to him, and he was okay with it. And then one day my wife and I were walking around these mainly empty halls, and she saw the Dragon's Lair poster and said, why don't you do that? There's a guy and a girl in there, can you do that? We're like, I can't believe this is going to be perfect, because the last scene in Dragon's Lair, you have the dragon looming over Dirk, who's about to kill him, and she's in the globe. So we put Daphne in her prison on the woman's room door, and Dirk on the men's room door, and then the dragon basically hovering over the entryway into that area. And it's a 360-degree thing, so when you're about to go to the bathroom, you're going to walk right under the dragon and see this whole thing played out. And, oh yeah, we have a Ye Whirlpool sign. If you're a Dragon's Lair fan, we made it as authentic as possible. But that whole art thing was a really happy accident that makes that place really very special today.
I know we're probably running low on time. My phone just died, so I don't know how much we have left, but any questions? I saw someone before. Yep.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say I'm charmed by your Texas accents.
Oh, yeah.
I'm from New Jersey.
I say about 2 words before people down there is ready to pull out some rope and string me up. Yeah.
I'm from New Jersey. So.
All right, so you know.
Yeah, I do. So the 100-year question that Sean was talking about is an interesting one, because you're the National Video Game Museum. That's a very broad name. So does that 100 years from now, Nintendo Switches and Xbox Ones are going to be historic relics? So are you constantly going to be, like it seems like a never-ending process at this point. And at what point do you consider something qualifies to be entered into your museum if you are going to be growing?
I think we pretty much decided the previous generation.
There's an interesting other aspect to the three of us in that, John lives in Texas. John retired from his full-time job when the museum opened, and Joe wanted or needed to go back to New Jersey to take care of his personal business. And John kind of assumed the role of day-to-day director in the museum. Joe and I are in constant contact with him and are down there, every month for some reason or another. But anyway, Joe and I's full-time job is we both own video game stores. So I own a video game store in Chicago, and Joe owns a video game store in New Jersey. So the instant that we decide that we need to have a complete Switch collection, we already have one. We're missing a couple of games here or there, but we can build a collection anytime that we want. And in a lot of ways we do anyway. I often stash things and Joe stash things. Every day when things come into my store, you know what, this is kind of cool, we need to send this down to Texas. So I'm constantly sending boxes down to Texas. John just got 2 of them from me the day before we left. So our collection is constantly evolving, and I don't really think that there is a cutoff for us. We have a Switch on display in the museum, we have an Xbox One, we have, I think we have the Major Nelson unboxed Xbox One, the very first Xbox One that was unboxed on YouTube was donated to us by somebody at Microsoft, and we have that on display signed by the development crew, I think. But yeah, no, there's no cutoff. It doesn't have to be classic. But if we are lacking something, we pretty much.
Kind of a related question, but instead of cutoff for new things, more laterally, like computing platforms that aren't maybe strictly gaming platforms, and related to talking about the fate of things from auctions. That next workstation from yesterday,
Yeah.
I was surprised to see that there, and surprised to see that it only went for $850, whereas posters went for thousands.
Yep.
That's an important piece of computing history. And is that something that fits in the video game museum?
Do you know that next computer was the only thing in that auction I was really interested in?
Same here.
Yeah.
Who got it? Did you guys get it?
I think it was.
We didn't get it,
It
no.
was somebody.
But the only reason we didn't get it is because of transportation, but I'll be honest with you, the Sid Bolton collection, the main reason that we were interested in Sid Bolton's collection is he had assembled a pretty decent selection of computer stuff that, you know, ours is okay, but that's never been our focus, so we thought, wow, let's see if we can buy Sid's collection and add all of this cool computer stuff. Now, we do have a fair amount of computer stuff, particularly computers that are gaming related, but like you say, computers that are not gaming related haven't really, like the next, exactly. That hasn't really been our focus, but it is something that we consider.
Yeah.
In the back?
I have a question about what seems to be a conflict in your long-term plans. So Joe's talking about setting up a library-type format where the public can check out a game, presumably for on-site play. And Sean has mentioned the 100-year plan. How are those going to work out given the inherent wear and tear of daily use of a game? If you're dealing with limited, rare, and finite number of hard copy games.
Well, obviously, if it's the only game or the only copy of a game that exists, then people aren't going to be able to play that game. I mean, wherever possible, we'll make that available. But you know, certainly, I can't. I mean, there are only a handful of games that we only have one copy of, and
You're like, you're not gonna, here's the Nintendo World Championship card, go have fun with it.
You just need some of those hermetically sealed boxes with the gloves that you
And we've had this discussion quite a bit, that it's a totally valid point, right? Do you really want people handling that stuff when it's just getting older and older and more worn?
Yeah, 'cause
But
even-
maybe, go on,
Even
sorry.
if now, if you have 100 copies of the original Zelda, but in 100 years from now, are you still gonna have 100? So at what
Well, we'll
point do you
save the
start
last
saying-
one.
Yeah.
we'll all be dead in 100 years. That's somebody else's
When
problem.
you're talking about saving for the future generations, how are you gonna manage that when there are certain games that are desirable but abundant, and looking forward 100 years, some of the plastic's probably gonna start breaking down and those physical computer components.
I think that's our job, is to gather as much of it together, preserve it as best as we can, and then at some point we hand it off to somebody else, and then they continue to do that as best as they can. I don't think that there's a perfect answer to that, but.
Conservation.
Restoration is something to think about too,
Yeah, conservation can only take you so far. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at even big museums with art and stuff, they're finding out that there are these brown, the yellows of these art, masterpieces on display are now turning brown, and as much as you can do, there is a limit to immortality, so to speak. You can only do so much. So we probably have time one more question, and then we'll do a drawing. Well, actually, go ahead, right there.
So my question is actually sort of on the 100-year plan, but more of an overarching financials question. Like keeping the museum open for 100 years requires people coming in the doors or donations, or I guess I'm kind of wondering, do you have like outreach for the community, bringing elementary school field trips, or how do you keep people coming in? How do you keep?
We do a lot of field trips.
Every day we have.
So educational is a big thing for us, and even in community involvement. I mean, we've been involved with One Up for Cancer. Actually, next month at the museum, we're doing fundraisers for One Up for Cancer. We worked with Wounded Warriors, and we do a ton of outreach for STEM and STEAM for local schools. We have a grant from the IGDA Foundation to bring in low-income schools that might not be able to afford a trip otherwise. This past year, we had our first scholarship awards. We gave out 4 scholarships to incoming freshman college students that we awarded in a variety of categories, women in tech and all these different things. So that's important for us. And, we do have a certain amount of donations and fundraising come in and ticket sales at the door. I don't really see that stopping because we are moving along and updating, and as we go, it'll just keep growing and growing. And certainly a 2.0 would be a huge influx as well. But that's all stuff we're working on to make sure the longevity of this thing, again, we always say this is 1.0, we can only do so much with 10,000 square feet, and it was more of a proving point to say, hey, we did this, with really no help from the industry. So going forward, that we will be, reaching into deeper pockets than ours. So we probably have to. Maybe one more question.
One guy in the back in the blue had his hand up the whole time.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so with an eye towards the whole idea of having a plan, and this is more kind of a near-term question. A lot of the industry didn't have a plan. So if you walk through the arcade out there, what you smell is you smell a lot of hot electronics. You smell a lot of arcade cabinets that were designed for cost. They weren't designed to last a long time. And they've got stuff like the Tempest machine that's got a color vector monitor that nobody in the world makes anymore. What are you guys doing for stuff like that, just to keep that kind of stuff alive?
We have technicians that work, so in the museum, we believe in being original. We don't use LCD screens. It's all original hardware, et cetera, et cetera. How long will that last? I don't know. So, you know, a perfect example is Dragon's Lair, right? They make a thing for the Dragon's Lair called a Dexter board. Does everybody know what that is? And so basically where your Dragon's Lair motherboard plugs into a laser disc, which has a spinning disc inside of it, a player, and it's constantly breaking if someone taps the machine or whatever. Now they've basically taken that laser disc and put it on a ROM. So if you plug in that Dexter board to your motherboard, it takes the place of a laser disc player. And we're out of time. All right, we got to do this real quick. So, but basically, to your point, we're trying as long as we can. We'll keep it going with original stuff, with repairs and whatnot. So, yep. Everybody got the tickets? I'll shake. Shake and I'll take them. I also have a couple shirts real quick. Who wears a medium? Okay. I got a 2XL. Okay. And medium. Another medium. All right. This is the name of it. Ron Dodgers. Oh, no. That's another story we'll tell another time.
All right, so here we go. Ticket number 961. 4806.
Anyway.
Watch it. Keep an eye on Anthony. Sometimes he pulls the wool. No, that's it. That's it. You're the winner. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.